Good evening, and welcome to the People in Clinical Trials webinar. Thank you all for taking your time out this evening to join us. I am with Molly. She will be taking us through working across African countries as a CRA. So she's going to be telling us about her experience working as a CRA and monitoring clinical trials across a few African countries. She will give like a 15 to 20-minute presentation, and at the end we will be taking questions, comments. So you're welcome to unmute or send a comment in the chat box, and then we can take it from there. So let's make it interactive and yeah, have fun. So Molly is a CRA currently. She's a qualified nurse and has a master's degree in public health. And she's going to be taking us through this experience, which is very exciting. So without wasting any more time, Molly, you can take over.
Thank you, Victor. I hope everyone can hear me well. So as Victor said, I'm a CRA. I currently work with IQVIA, and this presentation is just an overview of my experience and what key factors I've learned as a CRA across Africa. So just things to consider. So I'll just do a short presentation on the on a point form analysis. So one thing that as a CRA you need to consider as you plan your travel and monitoring across different regions is the regulatory and ethics aspect. We need to have knowledge prior to going to the different countries of any different in regulatory and ethics, the boards that are available and that your site will submit to, how often they meet, how often they expect submissions from the protocol that you're going to monitor, for the progress reports. Are they done annually or biannual? And how submissions are done, what documents are expected. So these are things as a CRA you need to research on prior to your monitoring visit and have knowledge of. The good thing about this is we all are governed under GCP, so GCP is universal. So once you have your GCP knowledge in check, you don't need to keep revising on that for the different countries. But just to know, it's good to know as a CRA any differences a country has or a region has in terms of regulatory and the ethics. So the other thing you need to also try and find out is their approach to clinical trials. You find different centers approach clinical trials differently, be it in the pharma view of clinical trial, where they do the pharma clinical trials, or is it in the educational clinical trials where a trial is being done for example, a master's project or a PhD project. So you need to find out, because this usually affects how the site is invested in implementing the protocol. And also it helps you to know how to relate with the site and the PI on the basis of implementation of the clinical trial protocol. Also, you should also look at your knowledge resources. So in a situation where you work in a multi-centered CRO or company, you can use your regional staff to find out about the different aspects of clinical trials in the region. So your fellow clinical research associates, or just people who work in the companies, the CTAs, the regulatory officers. So the good thing about the field is that we are always surrounded by people who know something that you may not know. So you just have to learn to be ready to ask in situations that you're not sure of. Because as an individual, you will not have knowledge of everything. Since clinical trials are very broad and there are very many aspects of clinical trials, and also very many therapeutic areas that you may not be aware of. So once you know the people you can seek for knowledge, also consider the sites that you're going to, create a rapport before going to site, have someone you can contact to gain any information that you may not have prior to getting to site. This can be the PI, the study coordinator, the lab manager, depending on what information you'll be seeking. So have their contacts, or just make note of what you don't know about the specific areas and research on who can give you this information prior to going to site. Also, once you've had all this planned out, one key factor to always not taking note is planning your travel. So for every region, there are different documents that you'll need, be it the visa. For example, for us Kenyans going to South Africa, we need to have a visa to allow us to work in South Africa. You need to look, you need to look at your flights availability, so that sometimes, depending on the region you go to, for example, flights from Kenya to Malawi are not daily flights. So you need to look at the flight schedule and the airlines that go to the different regions that you want to go to, and plan in advance. So at times it's also cheaper to book your flight in advance. And also you avoid the last minute rush where you can't find a flight to go to your destination. So you also need to look for good accommodation around the site that you're going to monitor, that should be secure for all. I think this is good for all genders, but speaking from my experience, just you need to be extra careful as a woman traveling alone in a situation. But in times where you travel in groups also, this is very important, because even if you're traveling for work, I think security comes in first. Also for this situation where the current affairs also dictate our travel, you look at political situations in the country, in the regions. For example, there are countries where when it comes to when they have elections, they're expected to be maybe some violence, some demonstrations. And these are situations that may affect you going to site, or even the site staff going to site, may affect your security. And also for the current situation where we have the COVID pandemic, most airlines in most countries expect you to have a negative COVID certificate before you travel, which for most situations, the certificate shouldn't be older than 72 hours prior to the date of travel. So you should also consider this while traveling. For example, a country like Malawi expects anyone coming in to self-isolate for 10 days prior to going in public. So these are the things you need to consider while planning also. If maybe you can get a waiver for some of the situations that may affect your site visit. For example, you will not expect to visit a country and stay in the hotel for 10 days. So you can work with your site staff or the PI to see how you can get a waiver for this regulation that is implemented in their country. Also, something to also consider is the cultural differences. You'll notice when you go to different, even different regions in your own country, and in this situation, like in different parts of Africa, our culture is very diverse and different. So even how you relate to the site staff, how you relate to the people, for example, in the hotel, the people you interact with in public is very different from what would happen in your home country. So these are things you need to look at and consider how you approach, for example, the PI, the situations where in different cultures where people don't shake hands, the different cultures where you have to say hi in the morning, the different cultures where you have to ask someone how they're doing, and if you don't, it's considered to be rude. The different cultures where if they offer you food, you shouldn't say no to, because if you do, it's considered to be rude. So this affects how you work with your site, how you create rapport, and even if these are things that happen in the region, it's also good to ask like the site staff what they're aware of, because some may not be very sensitive to some factors since they know you're a foreigner, but there are some people who may be sensitive to things that you're not keen of in terms of their culture. So my experience in general has been in just 5 countries so far. I've monitored in Kenya, Malawi, Ghana, Tanzania, and South Africa. So I find that all these factors have helped me in my preparation throughout the different countries and in my day-to-day working with the site, on-site and off-site. In terms of, you look at in situations where you experience language barrier, because there are some countries where English is not their first language, which is most countries, I think, in Africa. And there are some countries where they speak English better than other countries. So these are things you should consider, because even as in remote monitoring, you may be working with people in, for example, Russia, India, where you find sometimes with how they construct their sentences may be rude to you, but it's just that the difference in, like, the politeness gets lost in translation, because sometimes they use Google Translate to just form a sentence in English for you. So if you're sensitive to these factors throughout your working as a CRA or as a clinical trial professional, I think it will help in your planning and your general experience and working with the different people from different cultures. So that's all from me. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, but I'll just finish off by saying don't forget to enjoy the experience, because traveling can be a lot of work and it can also be fun. So don't forget to put the fun in it as you travel in the different regions. For example, my background photo there, I took time off and took a hike in Cape Town. And the first slide here, that's Lake Malawi in aerial view, and that's the sunset from Lake Malawi. So always take time and enjoy your surrounding as you travel. So that's it from me, Victor.
Thank you so much, Molly. It was a very wonderful presentation and also an eye-opener, to be honest. A lot of things that, when we travel locally, we don't really consider. But now that you have brought this to our attention, it's things that we really need to think about when we're going to be traveling and working abroad. So fantastic presentation. So we're now going to open the floor for comments and questions. So I'm going to ask that if you would like to give a comment or ask a question, just to raise your hand, and then I'll call your name, and then you can just unmute yourself and ask me your question. Or if you are maybe not comfortable with speaking out, you can just send a message to the chat, and then I'll read it out for Molly. But while we're still waiting for hands and questions, maybe Molly, you can just tell me what was the most challenging thing that you've experienced in your time monitoring across these 5 different African countries?
So I think the most unique thing that I have experienced is on one occasion we were going to site. I was with my team, and then this was a planned visit weeks prior to the travel. And then on the morning where we were going to site, the PI calls us and tells us we cannot go to site. Okay, because I've already told you the different regulatory aspects around COVID, so you may know. So, and then he told us that we'll have to go to the hotel and self-quarantine for 10 days, and then that's when they'll allow us to go to site. So this is crazy because we were already halfway driving to site, and they came from site and met us halfway on the road because we had to stop and he had to come, and he was like, no, we can't go to site, we'll put them at risk. And we were trying to explain in this situation, we all had negative COVID test. We are the ones who are going to put ourselves at risk because the staff had not been tested in any way. And also the site already had measures to ensure that we didn't have contact with multiple people at site. So we were only going to work with specific people. So on the first day, they even brought files for us to the hotel to actually work on. And we informed the sponsor, and the sponsor said in terms of even JCP and other regulatory aspects, the files should not leave site. And now the files had to go back, and there was a lot of conversations that happened behind on emails, and eventually we were able to go to site to do the monitoring. But that was very unique, and as much as it shows you, as much as you may plan with the site, things may come up that you don't expect that will hinder you from doing your monitoring as you'd planned. And it's always good to consult, because we had to consult the sponsor, the management team in the CRO, and eventually something worked out and we were able to go to site.
Yeah, very, very strange. And yeah, I can imagine how frustrating that was at that moment. So we have a hand from Umpile. So I'm going to take that question from Umpile, and I saw Sarah was on unmute. So if you do have a question, Sarah, after Umpile, the floor is yours. All right, Umpile, you can go first.
Thank you, Victor. Hi, Molly, and thank you for the presentation. I have only one question at the moment. I have always found it a pain, to be honest, to monitor and review ethics and reg for files for South Africa alone. I haven't had the opportunity to be on site at other countries, but I've done it remotely, but it has always been a pain. Maybe it's because I don't have that, how do you say, the passion, because it's always confusing me. So I wanted to find out from you, is there a useful tip that I can use moving forward to make it easier on myself to go through the reviews of ethics and reg binders much easier, or rather with breeze, apart from obviously referring back on the latest or the last submissions and all that? I don't know if I'm clear enough.
I think I understand what you're asking. What has really worked for me is having a tracker. So so when each submission is done, you just maintain a tracker of the documents that were submitted, when it was submitted. I think for South Africa, you receive a stamped copy of the, what is it called? The cover letter that went with the submission. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't have so much experience in
that is
South
correct,
Africa.
Molly.
Okay. So once you have the list of, if it's a progress report, this is what goes with the progress report. Just have like when it was submitted, a checklist of when it was submitted, what was submitted. And so when you go to your binder, you know what you're looking for. If it was submission done in January or in July, you know you expect the checklist that goes with the submission, the cover letter, the other site-specific documents. So it's easier for you to note if anything is missing. And from that submission, you know, from pharma ethics, you expect feedback in a week or so, or 2 weeks. So you know you should see also the stamped copy of the cover letter in file. So that's what has worked for me for my sites. So just maintaining an Excel or a Word document with the submissions that have gone through, and using that to do your reviews. And then once you've done a review of a certain submission, you're done with it, and at least it can be a progress kind of review from there on. I don't know if I've made sense.
Okay, yep. We have a response from Umpile, and she's happy with that.
Yes, it makes sense. Thank you. Thank you. It helps quite a lot, because like I said, reg for me is a pain, but I will definitely use your tip, and hopefully it will be a breeze moving forward. Thanks, Molly.
You're welcome.
Right, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Molly, and thank you, Victor. It was a great presentation. So I have two questions, and maybe you can give us some insight on your experience when going to the different African countries. Have you had challenges with the documentation in other languages? Did you need interpreters to assist you? And also, are you doing more remote monitoring now in the light of COVID? So maybe you can just give us some insight on your experiences relating to those two topics. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of language barrier, so there's always the English version of all the documents. So that's what we use to actually review the other versions in the different languages. And also, prior to the site actually implementing the use of translated document, we usually have certified translators, and also as a monitor, just when you're on site, you can ask our site staff who understands the language, like for example, the ICF, to explain to you what like a paragraph says, as you look at the same paragraph in English, and just try to see if it gets the same meaning from your end in English and from what the different language actually says. Yeah, so that's what I've been doing, more so for the ICFs that are in different languages. And then also in terms of traveling, I've been traveling throughout. I think I told Victor this before. I think from last year, July, I haven't spent like 2 weeks consecutively in my house. So I've just been traveling. What to keep in mind is stay safe, do your COVID tests as part of the travel. Yeah, so I think mostly it's just, we always wear masks on site. We always wear masks on transit to site. So I've been lucky enough not to test positive ever since of COVID. Yeah, so I'm just waiting to get vaccinated so far, but it hasn't affected, it only affected my travel, like I think in the first 4 months of the pandemic, but after that, everything has been okay.
Yeah, no, that's something
Thanks
to be
very much.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, for the questions. That's something to be grateful for, Molly, that
Yeah,
with
I'm
all the
very grateful.
traveling. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is there any other question, comments that anyone would like to make?
Yes, actually, with regards to translations in terms of now the language, the spoken language and written language, I've actually come across incidents whereby, for example, an ICF has been translated, but then now you get to site, because as we all know, spoken language and written language, they pretty much differ. And I remember one time I was at site and the ICF was in Sesotho. However, the translation was made in Southern Sesotho, and the participants signed the ICF, but they were not quite clear of what they were actually signing themselves into, because they were speaking Northern Sesotho. So this one is not necessarily directed to you, Molly. The question is for everybody else. In my case, I had to ask the site to indicate if they went through the whole process of explaining what the participant was getting themselves into, because now it boiled down to a snowball of now the participant showing up almost every week because of the reimbursement. We all know that that's also one other factor that motivates participants to be active. So how did everybody else, has everybody else rather experienced a situation whereby the language barrier, even though it is Sesotho, in most cases we generalize Sesotho, Xhosa, or any other language. Have you come across a situation whereby you had indifferences in that department?
I have no experience with that challenge, Mpili, but I think this is something that we can maybe continue the discussion on LinkedIn under the same post that I've shared about this meeting, because we are out of time. We have 30 minutes only, and we have exhausted our time. So yeah, I'd like to thank everyone who participated, everyone that attended. Thank you for your time, and Molly also for putting together this wonderful presentation. Thank you. Also like to give thanks to African Farmer Review for sponsoring this webinar. They have made this truly possible, and I urge you to get in touch with them, follow them on LinkedIn. They share really good updates on the industry information that's happening, very current, up to speed all the time. And again, I would love to ask you to get in touch with me on LinkedIn if you would love to present, if you would love to sponsor the webinar. Get in touch and let's keep the conversations going. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night and we'll be in touch. Cheers.